Good.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to let all the attendees join the webinar. It takes a few seconds as everybody comes in this morning for our very exciting webinar live from the south of Israel. Once I see that everybody is in, I'll get started on my introduction and we'll get going this morning. Once again, we're just going to let everybody join the webinar, and once everybody's in, we're going to get started with our program. Maybe about 20 more seconds. I see the numbers are leveling out. So I think we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody here from Los Angeles. This is Dan Gold with the Jewish Federation. I want to welcome you again to the first program of week 3 of our virtual Israel trip. This is overall day 7. This is the 7th live Zoom from Israel that we have done throughout our summer virtual Israel trip. We're very excited to have back our favorite tour guide, Yishai Sabag, who's with us live from the Moshav of Nativ Ha'asarah in the south of Israel. We're going to give it to Yishai in just a moment. I have a few words I'd like to say to begin the program. If you've been with us in the past, this intro may be familiar, so I appreciate you bearing with us as we get everybody on the same page. So once again, we're doing this program, of course, because everybody here in LA, throughout our country and throughout Israel, is still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're reduced to having to communicate and do these programs with our brothers and sisters in Israel over Zoom. And so we're thrilled that our partners at IGT, the tour company in Israel, and World Express Travel here in Los Angeles were able to help coordinate such an important and really incredible tour. Even though we're sitting here, we're still able to see and feel and experience Israel as best we can. So we just want to thank them for helping us put this together. Our entire federation, of course, has pivoted to deal with the community's needs in this challenging time. Early on, when the pandemic struck, we expanded our grant funds for people in need of cash assistance. We created a new interest-free loan fund for the Jewish community. We made grants to synagogues to help congregants pay for food, and we expanded the work of our whole social service platform. We also transitioned our community programming, especially for young adults and families with young children, to virtual programs, as I've said before, such as this. Last month, most importantly, our board endorsed the $6.2 million phase 2 response plan, which was made possible by moving funds from our programs that are either not happening or have been reduced, and by raising over $2 million and counting in a quiet emergency campaign from our philanthropists. Our federation is committed to our community and partners in the south of Israel. And in fact, much of the work that we do to support Israel happens in terms of building resiliency in the south with Southern families, which is specific to the topic that we're going to talk about today and throughout all of our Zoom sessions this week. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in today's program and certainly throughout the programs of the week. A few quick housekeeping items. We want to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A section of your Zoom window. Yishai will probably be stopping 2 or 3 times throughout the tour to take questions. I'll be asking you questions, so if you have any, feel free to do it there. We also will be doing some poll questions. If you've been with us before, you know that every once in a while, especially if Yishai has to walk a little bit and there's a little bit of break in the explanation, we'll put some poll questions up on the screen. It's just to make it more interactive, a little more fun, get to know you, the audience, a little bit better. If it's blocking your view, you can just X out of it very quickly. I also will say that on this particular tour, there may be a little bit more distance that Yishai has to travel than normal in terms of walking from one part of the Moshav to the other. And so we'll just ask that you bear with us. We'll be showing some images and doing some poll questions during that period. It's really not a long time, but just to be prepared. And on that same note, just to remind you that, this is live. Yishai is with us in the same moment that we're here, and dealing with internet sometimes can create a little bit of a lag. And so just don't think your computer's freezing. It might be the case that a couple times, there could be some lag on the internet. And so just bear with us when that happens. And then finally, I'll just add that, we appreciate everybody who's joined us thus far on our virtual Israel trip on each of the different sessions. Each session you must register for them individually. It does not, once you register for one, it does not register you for all. So my colleagues on the call here are going to be putting in the chat box some links to help you register for future sessions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ishai, who once again is live from Moshav Nativ Ha'asarah, and take it away, Ishai.
Okay, everyone, I'm so happy that you could join me this morning or this afternoon here in Israel. I wanted to start the day with telling you a little bit about myself. I've been brought up and grew up in a Moshav, a community, a village, very much like this one, a little bit further from the border with the Gaza Strip. It's not really a border, but we'll talk about it later. Give or take 20 miles from Gaza. This is where I spent wonderful childhood, very green around, a lot of grass, very open, people super friendly, saying hello to each other. Each family had a farm. My grandfather had a farm. And ever since I could remember myself, I was in the farm, in the cow shed, on the tractors, in the fields, in the orchards, hanging around. My grandfather had in his farm two working hands, two labor that come from the Gaza Strip. And I remember them from a very, very, very early age, taking me with them to the farm, to the cow shed, to look around, to see around Jamil and Abu Fais. Most of my childhood, they were around there. It's all started to change in the 1990s. In the middle of the 1990s, after the Oslo Accords, they had to add permits. So they still come, but not as often. And in the beginning of the 2000s, basically Gaza Strip start to get more and more isolated from Israel, and they stop arriving and coming. In the beginning, we were very, very, very hopeful, and we're in touch, and we believe that they're going to come in a month, or in 2 months, or in 6 months, but eventually we understood that we won't see them again. Now, it's not that we're the best friends ever, but it's telling us a little bit about the connection between the people and how the people and the nations got drafted away from each other. Now, as I told you, it was not really, and it's still not really far from Gaza. And I want to take you to my birthday, give or take 9 years ago. 9 years ago, for my birthday, we planned a big Shabbat meal. My sisters, my family were all supposed to sit together and celebrate my birthday. And as we're sitting over there, I'm getting a phone call. And on this phone call is my officer from my reserve duty call. And he told me, look, we need to be at the base in the camp. There is an emergency call for all the soldiers to come. Now, it was not a surprise because of the escalation in the last week, and I'm still serving on the reserve duty in a light infantry unit. And I told my family, you know what, let's postpone the Shabbat dinner for 15 minutes. I'm going to take all the equipment, going to put it on the car. We're going to finish the Shabbat meal, and then I need to drive. And as I'm loading everything on the car, there is an alarm going. Now, this alarm is something that we are used to. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what, we had hundreds or even thousands of alarms in the last several years. What is the chance that this one is going to find me? And there is so much to lift and to put on the car. Should I run or should I not? Luckily for me, I had 30 seconds to come with an idea and a solution, and of course, the right decision to run to the security room. Security room is a safe concrete room that every house in Israel that was built past 1992, past Desert Storm, had to head in it. In my small apartment at the time, there was no security room, but I could run to my parents, which is really not too far, maybe 30 yards from mine. I'm running, we all entering inside, give or take 9 people in a very, very small room. And we're waiting for the boom. And the boom is arriving, and it's really, really, really close. We're going outside when we're allowed to go outside, running around, and we start to understand, we look and we try to understand where this rocket was landing, what is the location that it was hitting. And we find out that the neighbor house, actually 2 houses away from ours, had a missile that landing in their living room and kitchen. Luckily for them, they also decided to run to the security room. Okay, so that was 9 years ago. 6 years ago, it was 7:30 a.m. Same thing happened, not my birthday, but same thing happened. Summertime, this is the time, actually it was 6 years, it's 6 years and 3 days. 7:30, once again, the alarm, the alert, and we all running to my parents' security room. We're jumping inside, waiting from the boom. The boom arrived, but this one, it sounds even louder, and we understand that it's landed much closer to us. When the time has passed, we're supposed to wait inside for a whole minute. When the time passed, we're running outside, and we found out that the rockets this time landed in our backyard, give or take 30 to 40 feet from the security room. Okay, earlier today, I asked Dan to share some picture, and you can see in the picture that my father still had not finished his morning shave, but there's no time to finish. So he's running to the security room with half of his face full of foam. You can see the people digging the rockets from the yards, and I have here in my pockets some of the shrapnel that were flying through the house. There is a picture over there with the walls of the house, and you can see brighter spot on them. Those brighter spots are the spot of the shrapnels that were flying through the wall. Okay, so those are some pieces of those shrapnel, and this is the reality for us. So when me and my wife were building our new permanent house that we're very happy to enter to just a few months ago, one of the first things that we were thinking about is how to locate, where to locate, and how to build the security room so it will be accessible to everyone. And more than that, it will offer us and allow us to stay inside for a very long time. You see, when they build the one in my parents' house, people say, you know what, it's just to be cautious. There is no real need to think about staying there for a long time. But as we can learn, and we're going to learn today in this tour, some people unfortunately must spend a very long time, sometimes nights, 2, 3, up to 4 days in this room, the entire family. Why? Because every few seconds there is an alert, there is an alarm, and they need to run inside and find some safety. So this beautiful village that we see here around, this beautiful community, is in what we call on the Gaza envelope. Okay, on the Gaza envelope, we're talking about people that our definition to their location is 15 seconds. They have 15 seconds to run to find security and safety, and 15 seconds is not a lot. Try to imagine you sending your kids to school. They're waiting for the school bus to come and pick them. They need to have a security room next to them. So if you, I'll ask Asaf with the camera to take picture of the bus stops just over there, and you can see that those bus stops made of concrete to allow the kids to have safety and security when they need to. Okay, this is the reality. So we're talking about 5,000 Israelis that living immediate rocket range that have only 15 seconds, and we're talking about, give or take, 1.5 million Israelis that have somewhere between 30 to 45 seconds to find shelter. We are going to have a tour in this community, and I'm telling you in advance, there is a map. I hope Danny can share the map maybe with the group. There is a map that can tell you and can show you how close Nativ HaAsara is to Gaza Strip. And I'm telling you now that Nativ HaAsara is the closest community to the Gaza Strip, okay? Now, a few words about Nativ HaAsara. Nativ HaAsara is a community that was originally built in Sinai Peninsula. In 1967, Israel was able to take over the lands of the Sinai Peninsula. And as Israel was taking over the lands of Sinai Peninsula, there was a small community that was built over there. The community is named after 10 Israeli soldiers that were killed in a helicopter crash over the Sinai desert. And when, in the peace agreement with Egypt, it was decided to give back the land to the Egyptian in the name of peace, the settlers of the original community decided to come to this location and rebuild their community over here in this location among the sand dunes. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to do is to meet someone from the community and to have him telling us a little bit about his experience as a parent bringing up children over here. So over here is Yoel, and in a few minutes, Yoel will tell us a little bit about. Okay, so once again, Yoel is over here, and we'd like to hear a little bit from Yoel about parenting over here.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Yoel. I live in Nativ HaAsara. I'm married. I have 4 kids. The big one is 22 years old. I have another one that is 19, and 2 twin girls that they are celebrating 14 this year. Actually, I live in this Moshav since the beginning, 1982. We arrived to this place right after the peace agreement with Egypt, after Camp David. And since then, I live here, my parents live here. And one of the strong thing about this place that there's a lot of time that people ask me and I ask myself, well, what I'm doing here. So I think the main reason is the community. So we have a really, really strong community that since we left Sinai, our parents realized that when they help each other, they are much stronger, and that's what we are doing right now. And as I understood, you're interested to know how we live and how we raise kids in this situation. So first of all, I have to say that raising kids is difficult. Anywhere you live, you know, it's difficult to raise kids. And in this place is even more difficult. And I will tell you why. It's not just to raise the kids, it's to live. Because we are kind of cheating ourselves. What makes me to raise my kids and kind of cheat them, because we are not thinking about the threats. If we believe that if we will think about the threats and think all the time what can happen if we will have a rocket or if there's Hamas terror group will come out of the ground. You can't really exist or live normal in this situation. And when you walked around with a camera and you saw this place, you saw that it's really colorful, the gardens are beautiful, everything is nice, even the shelters are really colorful, because we believe that when you deal with the good things of life and not thinking about the threats, you live kind of a normal life. And that's what we're doing. I have to say that it's something that happened through the years. Like, you need to understand that we live in this situation for 20 years, but it's not that bad all these 20 years. Like, if I will go back 20 years ago, we had small rackets, 2, 3 a year. And now when we have like a session with rackets for 24 hours, we get thousands of them. And it's not just the rockets, it's the Air Force attacks that we hear, smell, and feel. It's the Iron Dome that when it flies towards the rocket, to destroy the rockets towards the big cities in Israel, they explode just above us, and we can hear and feel it. The parts of it fall all around. And actually, the past few sessions that we had with rockets, we stayed in the shelters. You probably know that when we have the siren, we have about 15 seconds to go to the shelter. So there were so many rockets that we had to stay in the shelter for 24 hours with the kids, sleep with the kids. And when the session finished after 24, 36 hours, we tried to go back to a normal life like nothing happened. So it looks, when you will walk around, when you will see the kids behind me in the kindergarten, you will see normal people, happy people, that like nothing is really bad going on here. But when we hear the siren, or when we go into one of the sessions, suddenly you see at the faces of the people that, if you ask me, most of them suffer from kind of or another of post-trauma. Run away, go to the shelter, don't sleep at night, and all these kind of things. I have to say that my big son suffered from post-trauma when he was 16, the one that is 22 years old. We have a trauma center close to us that get a really good treat. And I always ask myself, you know, everybody wants to be a good father, good parents. And I always ask myself if I'm doing the right thing, because he gets a good treat, and now he's in the army and is in a much better place. But we all have scars. We can't deny it. So I always ask myself if I'm doing the right thing. And I'm sure that if this change that we had through this 20 years, if we had it in 1 week, everybody would have gone out of here, run away. But because we grew into it and we raised our kids through those years, that it became worse and worse and worse, we always hope that one day it will end. And another thing that holds us in this place, it's hope. As I mentioned at the beginning, we left Sinai in 1982. I was 13 years old, and it was, actually I gave my home when I lived in Sinai. I gave my home for peace. I didn't believe in peace. I hated the Egyptians. But after a few years, I had a great opportunity to live in Cairo, and I realized that there is peace with Arabs, with Egyptians. I went to school with Egyptians, and I realized that it was worth it. It was worth to leave the house for peace. And I hope that one day it will be peaceful here, because I can't see that there's like another way to solve this situation. But right now, I have to say it's quiet because of the corona. We just talked about it. I don't know why. They're not shooting, everybody, it's quiet. It's nice to live here. We had a few rockets. You know, it's funny to say, like, I think that if someone in the States will say, "Yeah, we had just a few rockets, we are happy to live here," it sounds weird. But when it's just 3-4 rockets, it's okay. When it's 1,000, it's scary. It's scary. It's not nice to live and not nice to raise kids. If you have any questions or you want to ask more, I will be happy to answer.
So we have a couple questions. Yishai, if you guys can hear, yeah. A couple questions, yes. If you can talk about the size of the Moshav. How many people live on it? If you even know the area, the size of the area, just give a little bit of description of the size.
Okay, so the question is about how many people live in Nativ HaAsara and what's the territory, the land?
The land is about 1,000 acres. And the number of people, it's a good question, because when we came here at 82, there were 70 families, about 350 people, adults and kids. And during those years, the village, the Moshav, became bigger and bigger. And most of the people that are living here are kids of the parents that came here in 82. I live here. It's like we have small tribes. My parents live here. My sister, I have 2 sisters that live here, and I live here. And it's something that it's not like just my family. Most of the families, a lot of kids when are around like 20, 21 years old, they go because of the army, they go to Tel Aviv to check how it is to live in the city. And when they have the first kid, they come back and want to live in the Moshav. Right now we have close to 1,000. And I have to say that the Moshav is getting bigger and bigger. We have planned for another 150 units for the next 3-4 years.
Okay, Yoel, toda rabah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the time. Be safe and be healthy.
Yeah,
okay.
Be healthy. Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay, so a few things that I want to point. First of all, I'm telling you now in advance, if you think that it's crazy that the number of people that want to live here are getting larger and larger, and actually the Moshav, this community and others, many others around, have a real difficulty finding housing solution to all those people. It will be even crazier to understand it after the next stop. But before we leave, I want you to understand, to have this feeling. I asked Asaf to take picture of this nice playground around here. Now this Moshav, if you've been here before, was even greener than it is today. But over the years, they had to make some adjustment. And what they did over here, they built a kitten garden on top of a big bomb shelter. I don't know if you can see it. Asaf, can you zoom on the window, on the bomb shelter window? Okay, so ask the camera to zoom on the bomb shelter window, and you can see this is a real bomb shelter over here, underground, most of it. And kids playing on top of it. So if they want, or there's an alarm, or there is any need to run into it, it's just a minute, okay? There are several enter doors or windows, and there are several ways for the kids to enter really, really fast, really, really quickly. This is the sort of reality over here. Those of you who have been here in the last 2 years may remember there's a lot of reconstruction taking place around here. And why is that? They came to understanding that in case that a rocket hit a house, it might be very dangerous to fix the house with the torn apart power cable. So they had to dig the entire community and all the power lines to there underground. I like to ask Asaf to take picture of the roof over the old kindergarten. They build a new one that is properly rocket safe, if you can say such a thing. You can see the whole kindergarten. This used to be the kindergarten, and as a temporary solution, they added the second roof on top of it. So in case that a rocket hit it, the kids are going to be safe. But this is the old one, and they have two new kindergarten that are properly made of concrete and much safer for the kids to play in. And today this structure is used for after-school activities and such. So you can see another bus stop for the kids. And once again, this bus stop is all painted and all nice. Once again, we understand that the power to survive it for the people coming from their mental situation and mental health. And we need to make sure that the people will feel safe and the people will feel that they can make it, and it's worth to make it. So they try to make the Moshav, the community, as nice as possible. So we're going through the community. You can see the beautiful gardening around, and we're going to the edge of the community. And over there, we're going to have a nice look out. The sun is going to be a little bit in our eyes, but I'll tell you, now as you're going to see, is built very, very, very close to the Mediterranean. So you have a nice sea breeze. All the time, especially summertime in Israel. Only this is a community that for people practice agriculture community are specialized in growing flowers and breeding seeds. They're not the one that today with all the agrotech, they're not the one that doing the genetic engineering for the seeds, but they get the seeds and they will have the seeds grow, and they will have the tomatoes or the watermelons or whatever people want to have. Want to see the people outside, but it's also dangerous, okay? In 2006, there was a student that died in a rocket attack over here when she was suffered critical injuries from the rockets. And in 2010, in the greenhouses of the community over there, one of the labor hands in the greenhouses, a Thai worker that was working here for the people of the community, also suffered some severe injuries and also was killed by a rocket. So those rockets are deadly. But as I told you, this is not Nativ HaAsara big concern. Before I'll talk about Nativ HaAsara big concern, I want to look around. Let's see if we can see a little bit of the landscape. We'll start with the city of Ashkelon to the north. You can see Ashkelon over there in the horizon. Ashkelon is a big city. It's a city of 120,000 people, and it's growing. There is a big plan for the city to be a city of 250,000 people in 10 years, okay? Ashkelon is about 5 miles from Gaza Strip, so it's very, very close by, and the biggest neighborhood that they're building today in Ashkelon is actually to the south. Now, crazy to build such a big city so close to the rocket threat. And I'll tell you, it is crazy. One of the things that I learned about Ashkelon, for example, is, you know, in most places in Israel, the most desirable apartments are in cities, in apartment buildings are the one that facing to the south. Why? Because you enjoy the nice sun and the healthy light of the sun entering your apartment. In Ashkelon, it's vice versa. Everyone wants to live in the northern part of the apartment building because it's safer for the rocket that coming to attack you. They come from the south. So you would like to be in the northern side. To the south, we can see the city of Gaza. Okay, it's really hard to distinguish between the different neighborhoods at the moment. There are several neighborhoods, such as Beit Lahiya, and to the left later on we'll see Bet Hanon. But if we look very close, we can see the skyscrapers. This is Gaza City. This is the center of Gaza. And if you look closely in the sand dunes, tilting up sand dune, there is a wall. Okay, it's a painted wall, but this concrete wall is where the fence is. Now, I said a fence with Gaza and not the border because the border is a line that you have between two entities that recognize each other. And unfortunately for us, Israel and Gaza would not recognize each other. Okay, so we cannot really call it a border. I want to ask you to look all the way to the Rhine. You can see this raised up sand dune. I can tell you it's not only natural sand dune. Some of it was raised by the army, by the military. It's really hard to see now because of the sun that's in our eyes, but there is a fence all around it, okay? This is an electronic fence, okay, not electric. Nothing will happen to you if you touch it, but there are electronic devices on the fence that send the back room, the operation room, the army operation room, signals and information, giving the army indication that someone been touching the fence and where and how much was it. We're going to see it later on, much closer. You'll be able to see all the electronic devices on the fence. Now, we can further look to the right and we can see one of the main targets for Hamas rockets in Israel. And this is this big power plant in Ashkelon of the National Power Company. This is one of the largest facilities in Israel, supply electricity for over 500,000 people. And this is one of the preferable and desirable, I would say, targets for Hamas rockets. So far, maybe we've been lucky, maybe we're smart enough and lucky enough to have the right security measures, such as the Iron Dome system, to keep this facility safe. And another facility that contain oil next to it, both are safe so far. But as I told you earlier, the main concern of people in Nativ HaAsara is not the rocket. First of all, once again, it's really hard to see, but just past this sand dune, when the concrete wall ends, and once again, we'll be able to see it much closer later on, the houses. And in those houses, there are Palestinians living, and some of the Palestinians that living over there, they are Hamas people. And when they want, they can take sniper rifle or machine gun, and they can target the houses over here quite easily. This is well within sniper range, okay? So this is the reason there is a concrete wall over there, to protect those houses over here from the snipers, machine guns, and bullets. But even something even scarier for the people of Nativ HaAsara. And in 2014, it was found out in the greenhouses over there. Once again, I'd like to ask to take the picture of the greenhouses. Okay, this is where people of the Moshav go to work and make living. And in 2014, they found over there a Hamas attack tunnel, fence crossing underground tunnel that was ready to be operated by Hamas people. And in this tunnel that was wide enough, tall enough, and big enough to have a motorcycle driving in, and they did find inside a motorcycle, the Hamas was planning of kidnapping someone, either a civilian or maybe a soldier, put him on the motorcycle and underground drive really fast to the center of Gaza and to have him all kidnapped over there, okay? The other thing that they could do, and this is what the people of Nativ HaAsara are really afraid of, try to imagine overnight 5, 8, 10 Hamas terrorists going out of an unknown attack tunnel, through the thick vegetation, sneaking into the community and start to butcher people around. Okay, so this is a real concern for the people of Nativ HaAsara in the last 6 years, give or take. Question so far?
Thank you, Isha. Yes, we actually have quite a few questions, so I'll try to group them into the questions. Can you talk about going back to our friend, of course, did you know what line of work he was in by chance?
At the moment? So he used to work for quite a long time for the Prime Minister office, okay? At the moment, like most people that work in the Prime Minister office, they're going to early pension, and at the moment is unemployed, if you're looking to hire, and is volunteering, telling people a little bit about their life over here in the Gaza Strip, around the Gaza Strip, in the Gaza envelope.
And I'm going to ask a two-part question. Can you talk about quickly the difference between a kibbutz and a moshav, and then what maybe are the economics that keep families living in the south? I mean, other than the fact that the obvious answer is that it's cheaper to live there, are there other benefits economically?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
The difference between a kibbutz and a moshav.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the difference between a kibbutz and a moshav, so I'll start and say you can hardly find a real kibbutz anymore. There are maybe 8 of those still functioning as a real kibbutz. The kibbutz was the idea of full socialism on the verge of communism. The kibbutz is basically one big farm that all the people that work in the farm are shareholders, okay? They work according to what the kibbutz tell them to do, and they get really no salary, but they get the food from the kibbutz, they get clothing from the kibbutz. Everything is owned by the kibbutz, and the kibbutz is the people of the kibbutz. In the Moshav, we're talking about community of people living together because they choose to live in a community that will support each other, but no one will force them to support each other. They want to do it, they volunteer to do it. They choose to sell together and buy together because it gives them more power, more bargaining power, but no one is forcing it on them, and each family had the freedom to cultivate whatever they want to do. Today, modern moshavs and kibbutz, most people do not find work in agriculture. Today, most people are working outside. How do people in Nativ HaAsara today make living? Nativ HaAsara is very close to Ashkelon, and tell you the truth, is really not too far from Tel Aviv, which is the center of the startup nation, as we can see in the tour in 2 weeks or so. Driving from here, and today there is, by the way, there is a very efficient train system from here to Tel Aviv. The train will take you less than an hour from here to Tel Aviv center. So many people that live here find work in Tel Aviv or in big cities like Ashkelon and Ashdod a little further away.
Great.
Any other
Maybe
questions?
we have one more question for now. If you can give us a quick glimpse of the most recent last few days of when Nativ HaAsara experienced any type of terror activity. How long ago was the most recent rocket, things like that?
Okay, so the most recent was 6 days ago. 6 days ago, there was a rocket that was 3 rockets that were launched from Gaza to random places. Those are the small rockets. It's funny to say those are the small rockets, but they're a little bit smaller and not very accurate. And we assume that they were
If Yishai's video is frozen, I'm going to let him come back on, and I'm going to take a question that folks had. There's a lot of questions about what the members of the Moshav do with kids, and how do they deal with the PTSD and the resiliency. And one thing I'll just say very quickly, first I'll make a plug for our Zoom call Thursday morning. We have a Zoom call Thursday morning with the head, as my colleague Jonathan posted, with the head of the Israeli Trauma Coalition, Tali Levanon. Tali Levanon is going to join us talk all about that, but I'll also say that as kind of a glimpse into that Israeli resiliency in dealing with PTSD and dealing with trauma is now woven into every aspect of Israeli society. We have the way the teachers are trained, the way the parents are trained, the way the bus drivers are trained. And so building resiliency and helping these communities deal with trauma is basically woven into every aspect of life. And that's what we're going to hear a little bit more about when we have Tali on Thursday, but it looks like Yishai's back, so I'm going to turn it back over to him to ask the question.
So I think you could hear me about the most recent. So I said, because the world is not very busy with the Palestinian story at the moment, and there's other big headlines, I believe that this is the main reason that they decided at the moment to keep it quiet, and there is not much for them to gain from terrorism at the moment. Okay. So what I want to do now, it's going to be a little bit challenging, but what we're going to do now, we're going to hop to my car and we're going to drive a little bit along the fence, the electronic fence that's surrounding this community. And then we're going to stop really at the concrete wall. So this is the plan. And while we're driving, I'd like to ask Dan to share with you some picture of those tunnels that I sent him earlier. Those tunnels that use the tourists, and the tourists are digging underground. And other picture that I want Dan to share, if possible, is so there is a am I on? Yeah. Okay, so there is a picture of the kites that I sent earlier to Dan about this is Israel big concern today. Those kites, sorry, not today. There were Israel big concern. Those kites, the kites were meant to burn in this time of the year, the fields, the greenhouses, the orchards around us. And later on, they start to send those balloons. Those balloons, and you can see those balloons are very inviting. By the way, those helium balloons can get really far. Two of them landed in my community 20 miles away from Gaza. And those balloons, some of them with Mickey Mouse and other cartoons on them, are meant to attract the children to touch them. Try to imagine your children, your child, your kid, find in their backyard beautiful bunch of balloons, very inviting to play with, but they're small bombs that attach to those balloons, and the minute your kids start to play with them, they trigger the bomb. So we're driving along the old fence of the community, and in a minute we're going to meet the new fence. The new fence is all electronic fence with all the electronic devices, and every now and then even security cameras that send the signals to the army operation room. And the minute there is anyone touching the fence, they can tell immediately how many people touched the fence. Was it people, or maybe it was a jackal that was touching the fence? They can tell how tall it was, if someone was actually cutting, someone was leaning against it, and then you can see next to it a dirt road. And no one is driving on this dirt road because this dirt road is for the army truckers. In case someone was able to enter, it will be very easy for them to read the tracks in the sand. Okay, so there is a vehicle that every day is driving around the community, even in the sand. So the army truckers, in case that they need to, will be able to tell if someone been entering, penetrating, visiting the community, and it was not supposed to do so. We're getting closer and closer to the concrete wall. And the concrete wall is really on the line, the fence. Once again, if you want, you can call it a border, although, as I told you, it's not officially a border because both sides do not recognize each other. But the idea of the concrete wall, and Nativ HaAsara is the only community in Israel that has such a concrete wall. The idea of the concrete wall is to make sure no one will be able to hit the people with any weapon at all. Now, to end to this concrete wall that we can see now, there is a new wall that they're building at the moment, and I think they're going to finish building it in few weeks, is an underground concrete wall. We'll try to point it from the car in a few minutes. And this underground concrete wall is supposed to stop any border crossing tunnels or anything of the sort. They just won't be able to cross underground. This is a really deep underground wall. Okay. So, I want you to look over there. You can see the real concrete. Once again, behind it, this is the Gaza Strip. Behind it, this is a Palestinian territory. Behind it, Israel does not operate. Israel does not run the place or anything of the sort. You can see all the electronic devices over here. This is a very, very sensitive location. And you can see the houses over there in the valley, over there in the valley. Okay, those are the northern suburb of Gaza. This is a neighborhood called Bet Hanun, and over there, this is the place that a lot of the agriculture is done. Okay, but if you look high above it in the sky, you can see the army intelligence facilities keep looking in this area. And why is that? Because over there, between the orchards, between the orange trees, it's much easier for the terrorists to operate, to dig, to shoot rockets from. So the army intelligence is keep looking. And just above this old hangar, you can see some new raised up buildings down. Okay, over there, this is the town of Sderot. Now, Sderot may be familiar or familiar name for you. Sderot is the largest town next to Gaza. Sderot is about a mile of Gaza, and 30,000 people live in Sderot, and the numbers are growing, and you can see they're building new neighborhoods over there. So it's indeed a crazy reality over here. Try to imagine living so close to such a tense border. Okay, and once again, because of the coronavirus, it's very quiet here these days. But a year ago, it was really, really crazy over here, and not because of the kites and not because of the balloons, because those been updated by a new threat, and the new threat was the marching of the thousands. Every Friday, thousands of people start to march to the fence and try to take down the fence. Thousands of people from Gaza, with Hamas people among them. And Israel was very, very careful not to harm any innocent people. But in those events, sometimes people were shot down. And why is that? Because we learned that in many, many times, the Hamas terrorists use those opportunities to plant bombs on the fence. And the next time an Israeli soldier will drive next to it, or will come to close a gate, to seal a gate, or to open a gate, the bomb will go on. Now, I want to give you time for questions, but before I do it, I just want to explain how the situation is an unfortunate situation. Today, Israel is facing, I would say, two, maybe three big threats. One to the south, which is the Gaza Strip. One to the north, which is Hezbollah, and Hezbollah extension, which is Iran. And one of the things we can see between Hezbollah and Hamas, which both are terrorist organizations, they keep learning from each other. When Hamas wanted to build his own rockets ability, they will have experts from Hezbollah sneaking into Gaza Strip to teach them, to give them the knowledge how to build a big arsenal of rockets. And when Hezbollah wanted to have border crossing tunnels, they had Hamas experts coming from Gaza explaining to them how to make it. So we can see that they both keep learning from each other. And this is a really tense and unfortunate situation. 2 years ago, Israel went on a big scale operation up in the north to expose the Hezbollah border crossing attack tunnels. Okay, so this is shortly a little bit about life here, around here in the Gaza Strip. And before I'll finish with a nice thing, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Isha. Yes, we do. So I'll try to combine them again. So the first question, you just mentioned the underground wall. Does it cover? Does it go the entire border with Gaza, or only sections?
So it's going. So the started section prioritizing the areas that needed it the most, but it's supposed to go all around Gaza. And I'll tell you something else. It's also going to the Mediterranean, because we did find some, once again, those tunnel crossing underground, undersea. Okay, the Hamas has its own Navy SEALs, and sometimes people tend to dismiss it, but they do have some abilities, and they did build for them a crossing tunnel undersea. Okay, so this concrete wall even go deep into the Mediterranean. It's going really deep underground. It has some crazy technology involved, and most of it is very secretive. This is a technology that Israel had to come with, technology that was not existed anywhere in the world, a technology that allowed Israel to map a very complicated network of tunnels, underground tunnels, really, really deep. Some of those tunnels are more than 60 feet in the ground, and Israel had to come with the technology to make it. Today, at least this is what they promise us, they do have a full map of all the border crossing or the fence crossing tunnels.
Thank you. I'll ask a little bit of a complicated question, which is how does Israel decide or know, or how does the IDF know when it needs to respond to an act of terror? And with that, a second part of the question, which is a little bit different, but we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks, but what's the difference between what the communities on the south deal with versus what the communities on the north of Israel deal with?
Okay. By the way, there are several soldiers over there patrolling around the community. I don't know if you can see them. And they do patrol here every day around the community. So let's try to answer it. First of all, the IDF does not decide everything. Israel is the democracy, and the government is the one that's deciding. And what the government is doing, the Minister of Security and Defense, they're basically writing out cases, and they said, this is the response in each of those cases. They're giving it to the head of the IDF in advance, and in that way, the IDF know how to retaliate and how to respond immediately at any case. And of course, later on, if something is extreme or there is a need for a second thought, the government will sit together and will discuss it, and they will decide on further notes how to retaliate to this act or to the other, okay? But every soldier, every combat soldiers that Israel sent to the borders to defend its border have on a daily basis had a routine of going through cases, okay? And say in case of A, you're doing B, in case of C, you're doing D, etc., etc. This is part of the routine of patrolling or protecting the borders, and it's very important that the soldiers will know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, okay? That is a huge responsibility on the shoulder of 18 years old boys and girls. And of course, it's not perfect, but in most cases, it's working really, really smoothly. I can tell you that when those thousands of people were marching to the fence on Fridays, those big demonstrations and rallies, those were very, very, very sensitive situation. And you have a group of snipers surrounding the area, and this is their decision. Should they shoot this guy or not? They need to be absolutely sure that this guy is carrying a weapon in order to shoot him. If he's just a civilian, he's not holding any weapon, they won't shoot him. So this is to answer the first part of the question. The second part of the questions, what is the difference? What is the difference between the South and the North? There is a huge difference. And once again, the difference comes from the government. The government, like in any democracy, they're the one that the prime minister and the minister of security and defense, they're the ones writing the policy, and they're telling their army, you should protect this community in those measures. That's meaning up in the north, Israel say, we are going to be way more assertive and aggressive. And why is that? Because we have a state that is responsible on the other side. If an attack coming from Syria, Israel will retaliate against the state, against the army of Syria. If it's Iran that's sending drones, Israel is going to retaliate against Iranian facilities, okay? In Gaza, the situation is way more complicated because there is no state on the other side. There is no sovereign entity on the other side. So Israel should be more careful with its retaliation and the way Israel handle those situations. One last questions before we'll do the final piece.
Yeah, maybe we just talk a lot of questions about people who staying on the Moshav. You know, there's even, you know, we get this a lot, of course, when we're there. Why do you stay? Do children stay when they grow up? So
why do you stay? Okay, this is a good question. So why do we stay? Not only why do we stay, why do we come? Because we have more and more people coming here. As I told you, the Moshav, not only Nativ HaAsara, those 70 communities around the Gaza Strip, the envelope of Gaza, are growing really, really fast, much faster than the population in Israel. And why is that? People want to come and move here for several reasons. First of all, as you can see, this place has a very good, strong sense of community. And believe it or not, in 2020, people want to have a sense of community. People want to be a part of something. People want to be able to walk to the local supermarket and to know people and their names, okay? So this is one thing. This is an amazing environment to bring together family. People do not lock the doors, okay? For two reasons. First of all, they trust their neighbors. And the other thing, in case that there is an alarm, you just run to the next house and you know to enter there and find a security room, okay? So there is a very strong sense of community. The government supports people. There are good tax benefits for people living over here, and the government tried to help people to handle those bad situations, maybe not perfectly, but as far as they can, as much as they can do. And I would say the last thing, I think many Israelis are patriotic, and more than that, most Israelis understand that it's everywhere. In the 1920s, it was up the north, the area of Kiryat Shmona, that was sheltered all the time by shell, sorry, all the time by Hezbollah. In the 2000s, it's Gaza. It might change all the time. And as the rocket range is growing from the south and from the north, today most of Israel is under rocket threat. Okay, maybe not those tunnels, but the rockets are everywhere. And really, people did their math and they say, you know what, it's good enough, or the math of the number are that way, so we'll move here. So before we leave, I want to share with you a story of, and we'll do it quickly, of a woman that moved to Nativ HaAsara, one of those families that move over here. She was not from here originally, but she wanted to come and live here in this community, and she's moving here, and she's an artist, and she arrived here, and she had this dream about living in Moshav, a community where everything is green around, and when she's going outside, she see concrete walls. So what she decided to do, she wanted to have nice concrete wall, but she also wanted to tell her neighbors she's not the enemy, and she understands that they're not the enemies, and the war is not between the civilians on both sides, or this escalation and the tension is sometimes between military forces. And what she's doing, she's starting this amazing project that's called Path for Peace. And over here on the concrete wall, there is a beautiful mosaic of pieces, and she invites people to come here. And by the way, there is another part on the wall behind us. And people arrive to her studio, and she's making those small little pieces of ceramic. And she invites people to write behind those pieces a greeting, wishful thinking, or really anything that they can think of. And she wants to have this entire concrete wall cover. And in the beginning, it sounds really ambitious, but I can tell you, as a guy that come here quite often, it's unbelievable. More and more pieces all the time. And what she chooses to write over here is in 3 languages: Hebrew, English, and Arabic. And the people that live over there in Bet Hanun, they could read it. Okay, later on we'll have once again the picture of Bet Hanun. The people live over there, they can read it quite easily. Shalom, peace, salam. Okay, so earlier today, I asked her to come and talk to us, but she couldn't, unfortunately, but she was leaving me such a piece. So what I'm going to do for all of you is going to put a piece on the wall. So I'm going to take this piece of ceramic and some hummus. It's not really a hummus, it's a special, it's look like a hummus, but it's not. And we're going to put it on the wall, and we're going to be part of this beautiful art of Tzameret, and we'll wish everyone over here on the other side peace and prosperity and health and only good in their life. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today, and I know that there might be many more questions. Feel free to ask Dan and Jonathan, and in case, I'm sure that they have the answer, but in case that they won't have the answers, feel free to ask them to send me the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them and to give you a better understanding of what's happening here today and in recent years, and as much as possible, okay? So thank you very much, everyone. I will say good evening here in Israel, and for you, good day. Toda rabba rabba rabba.
Thank you so much, Ishai, and thank you to everybody who stuck with us throughout our program. This was truly a remarkable experience, even sitting here in our homes in Los Angeles or throughout the United States where people are joining us. Ishai, I want to thank you again. This was one in a million opportunities, so thank you to IGT, thank you to World Express Travel, and just to pitch, since there were so many questions and so much discussion about trauma and resiliency. We have 2 more Zoom sessions coming this week live from Israel. On Wednesday morning, we have one of the creators of Netflix's show Fauda. His name is Avi Zakharov. He's a writer. He was in the unit that the show profiles, in the IDF unit that the show profiles, and he'll share with us what's really going on vis-a-vis Israel-Palestine. He'll talk about the show, of course. And then Thursday morning, we're going to have the director of the Israeli Trauma Coalition to really get into some of the details of trauma and resiliency in Israel. Once again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Ishai. I want to thank you all. Have a good day here in the United States and good evening to Israel.